He was used to stares, the kind that trailed him in boardrooms, five-star hotels, and luxury lounges. But nothing prepared Judge Harold Bennett for the humiliation he felt that morning, standing frozen at the jet bridge, holding out his first-class ticket like it was a counterfeit bill. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your ID again," the flight attendant said, her tone sharper this time. Her name tag read M. Wallace, and her tightly crossed arms seemed to reinforce the invisible line she had drawn between herself and Harold. Harold's hand didn't shake as he passed over his government-issued ID again, a federal judge's badge neatly tucked into his leather wallet. But his heart did. Not out of fear. Out of the same tired ache that came from knowing exactly what this was. "I'm just doing my job," she said with a cold smile as she turned the ID over, examining it like it was fake. "You understand, right?" He did. He understood too well. Other passengers, mostly white, mostly dressed no better than Harold, passed through without so much as a glance. Yet here he was, a black man in a custom-tailored navy suit, polished Oxfords, and the posture of someone who had carried justice on his shoulders for 2 decades, being treated like a criminal. "I fly with Liberty Air almost every week," Harold said evenly, his voice composed but firm. "This has never happened before." "Well, we take extra precautions when something feels off," Wallace replied, then leaned in slightly and whispered, "And no offense, sir, but this ID, it doesn't match what I expected." Harold met her eyes. "And what did you expect?" Before she could answer, the gate supervisor approached, clearly sensing the tension. "Is there a problem, Ms. Wallace?" "He's trying to board first class, but his ID seems unusual," Wallace said, her voice loud enough for a few heads to turn. The supervisor glanced at the ID and his eyes widened. "Ms. Wallace," he said quietly, "that's Judge Harold Bennett. He's a federal judge. And he..." Harold raised a hand. "It's all right." He looked around, noting the discomfort on the faces of nearby passengers. He took his ID back slowly, tucked it away, and stepped onto the jet bridge in silence. But what Wallace didn't know, and what would shake her later that day, was that Harold Bennett wasn't just a federal judge. He was also the silent majority shareholder in Liberty Air. He had started investing quietly years ago, building equity and influence behind the scenes. While others played loud games in the spotlight, Harold moved with dignity in the shadows, opening doors not just for himself, but for people who looked like him, people who were too often stopped, questioned, and doubted. By the time the plane landed, Wallace had already been summoned to a meeting she wasn't expecting. It was in one of the airline's private executive lounges, the kind only a handful of top brass ever stepped foot in. She entered the room, face pale, nervously clutching a notepad. Harold was already seated at the head of the table. Not in a judge's robe, but in an elegant charcoal suit, the kind of presence that didn't need a title to command respect. "Ms. Wallace," he said calmly, gesturing for her to sit. "Do you know why you're here?" She nodded faintly. I think so." Harold leaned forward. "Do you remember what you said to me before I boarded?" Wallace swallowed. "Yes, sir. I said the ID didn't match what I expected." He nodded. "That's right. And what did you expect, exactly?" She looked down. "I didn't mean, I wasn't trying to." "But you did," Harold interrupted gently. "You saw a black man in first class, and your instinct told you something was off." She nodded slowly, unable to meet his gaze. "There's a reason I called this meeting privately," Harold said. "Because this isn't just about me. This is about how many others you've done this to and never got caught." She looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. Harold continued, his voice steady but powerful. "I didn't invest in this airline to watch it become a reflection of the same bias I've spent my life fighting. We can't change the world overnight, but we can start by changing the way we treat each other." There was a long silence. Then, Harold stood. "You'll be attending a new training program we're launching next month. Not just you, the entire staff. One that focuses on unconscious bias, empathy, and professionalism. And you'll be helping lead it." Wallace blinked in surprise. "Me?" "Yes," he said. "Because change sticks best when it comes from someone who's felt the consequences firsthand." As Harold left the room, the lesson hung in the air like a quiet thunder: dignity doesn't shout, and power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes, it walks silently in Oxfords, handing over an ID, waiting to see who will rise, and who will reveal who they really are. Because true power doesn't humiliate, it educates. And the real flight worth taking is the one where we rise together.